What's up everyone? In today's video I'm going to talk about a couple of Bitcoin miners, and the market's a bit mixed today. We have some miners up while some are down. Bitcoin's doing pretty good today, but I'm going to talk about a Bitcoin miner that's a little bit up here, some things to look out for, and also a Bitcoin miner that's down today and that I have been adding to and I see as a great deal. We're also going to talk about the Fed meeting briefly, and I'm going to talk about some upcoming things we need to look at there. And ARK's very own Cathie Wood says that you need roughly a 20% allocation to Bitcoin for an optimum portfolio. And I'm going to make a prediction right now that Fidelity and Blackrock's spot Bitcoin ETFs, they're going to continue loading up on Bitcoin, and eventually the two together will hold 1 million of the 21 million Bitcoin by the end of 2025, by the end of this bull market. So far, they're roughly a tenth of the way there. Now, if you guys get something useful out of this, make sure you like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and let's get started. And first off, I want to talk about Iren Energy. Now, this is a Bitcoin miner that's actually down today while some others are up, but it's kind of a mixed day overall. And we have Iren Energy here roughly 62% down from its recent peak. And we also have earnings coming up for Iren Energy. This is expected in only roughly a week, and we have another Bitcoin miner that has upcoming earnings as well, and we'll touch on that in just a second. But Iren Energy is expecting a record quarter where revenue is concerned, and we should continue to see this across the board for the Bitcoin miners, record revenue while we're getting into the halving. However, once the halving hits, these revenues will take a hit while we wait for Bitcoin's price appreciation to make up for the fact that these miners are taking half the rewards for their Bitcoin mining, and that will take some time. One thing with Iren Energy is you might want to wait for it to bottom out a bit here. We did just recently create new lows, so maybe watching it trying to build out a support first would be a good way to go if you're starting a position here. For those of us that are a bit longer term, for those of us that have been in Iren for a while, most of us are just continuing to gobble it up, continuing to add up while it continues down, and take advantage of these cheaper prices to build up more shares than we would otherwise looking only a few weeks ago. Right now you can almost buy 3 shares for the cost of 1 if you were looking at Iren only a month ago or so. So if your goal is accumulation, if your goal is loading up on shares, getting as many shares as possible, now's a really great time to take advantage of it, considering we're down roughly 62%. One thing I'm watching for Iren Energy is a break of this descending wedge. I do think once we break out of this resistance here, we will see a reaction, and I can see Iren Energy running up to at least $5 because of it. For one, this is a psychological level, and it's also a level that Iren has reacted to in the past. We will likely find it as a resistance before breaking out of 5. It does have a history as a support, and you can see how the market reacted to a break of 5. We saw an accelerated sell-off. But Iren Energy, in my opinion, is much closer to its local bottom than the top, and I do think once we break this descending wedge, we'll see a pretty quick run towards 5, and then that'll be the next level to look out for a break. But I believe Iren Energy right now is a great buy. They were the most aggressive in their hash rate growth through 2023, whereas CleanSpark here was the most aggressive during 2022. And looking at CleanSpark, we're down roughly 37%, so not as far down as Iren Energy. CleanSpark's recently seen a little bounce, and I think CleanSpark's still a good add, although I have been more focused on Iren Energy on Sphere 3D, buying a little bit of BTBT as well. I'm kind of holding off on CleanSpark here, but it is also my largest holdings when looking at Bitcoin miners. CleanSpark's also reporting revenue very soon here, and they too expect a record quarter for revenue. And I've said in a previous video that I do expect they'll get closer towards 70 million, if not much above it, because right after the point that they gave this guidance, Bitcoin went on a pretty good run from roughly 25 to 30,000 all the way to about 45,000. So I do expect that Bitcoin price appreciation through October, November, and December that should cause a beat where revenue is concerned. But CleanSpark's also facing something similar, is this descending resistance line. If we close the day out green today and we can close out tomorrow green, the market will likely react to a breakout of this descending trend, this descending resistance. But as I said recently, 950 is going to be an important level to break out of, and I think that can bring us back to the 10s. Now, I also want to talk about this ARK Invest article here. I'll leave it down below for you. But Cathie Wood says basically 20% roughly is the ideal allocation to Bitcoin. And why roughly 20%? Why not like 30%? Why not 10%? Well, they say that their analysis suggests that allocating 19.4% to Bitcoin in 2023 would have maximized a portfolio's risk-adjusted returns. And while theoretically that portfolio that they're talking about, if you would have put 40% into Bitcoin, 60% into Bitcoin, yes, you would have likely gained more, but you would have also put much more risk on the table if things didn't go your way. And hopefully this isn't too small to read, but you can see that steadily the simulated optimal portfolio allocation for Bitcoin just continues to grow. 2015, they said a 0.5% of your portfolio in Bitcoin is the way to go. Now they're saying nearly 20%. And it's very exciting when you think about all these companies, all these asset managers really starting to look at Bitcoin. Imagine if/when they too see Bitcoin's optimal allocation as 20%. even say 5%. And I also told you guys that collectively Fidelity and Blackrock together will own eventually 1 million of the global supply of Bitcoin. And technically, I guess they wouldn't own it, but their portfolios would be holding it for their customers essentially. But Blackrock and Fidelity now collectively hold over 100,000 Bitcoin, and this is 0.5% of the total 21 million Bitcoin supply. And they now have 2.7 and 2.3 billion to their spot Bitcoin ETFs. It's only been a few weeks so far. What happens when we get to the end of 2024? And better yet, the end of the bull run in 2025? I do believe these guys can get to, if not exceed, 1 million of the overall Bitcoin. That is a huge chunk of the supply. I also want to mention the Fed meeting yesterday. We got a lot of the same old statements. We need to see sufficient data, we need to look at incoming data, and we'll talk about some of the incoming data in a second. And he even has some words on the potential for March rate cuts. And Jerome Powell said, I will tell you that I don't think it's likely that the committee will reach a level of confidence by the time of the March meeting to identify March as the time to do rate cuts. So likely in the following meeting from March. But you know, we do have some incoming data before then that could potentially sway the Fed. If we see that inflation continue trending drastically down, if we see unemployment heading up, and if we see housing continuing to get weaker. What we need to see is CPI, PCE, PPI all trending down. And one thing with CPI is while we have done a lot throughout 2023 and throughout the end of 2022 in bringing down inflation, we're still at this like sideways pattern here. We're just not going much lower. We're getting this just sideways action right around 3%. We need to be more towards 2. So getting CPI much closer to that 2%, just seeing it start trending down again would definitely be a step in the right direction. And I think that's what the real worry is here. Are we going to continue going down towards 2% or are we just going to stay where we're at here? And the Fed doesn't want to flip-flop. They don't want to go to lowering rates and then realize that they weren't sufficient in their rate hikes and keeping rates elevated. Because once they start lowering rates, the market's going to know what to continue to expect. They're going to expect to see continued rates cutting from there. So the Fed doesn't want to jump the gun too early. If anything, they'd probably rather be a little too late than early. At least that's how things have been. Looking at the past, looking at inflation, saying inflation's transitory, when in reality they should have started raising rates a little earlier. But looking at PCE, I'm definitely a little more optimistic. We're not as much of this sideways pattern like CPI. Although the last two reads were flat, they were the same. But PCE is getting towards 2%, which is positive. And I think seeing this come under 2.6% would be a big thing for the market to see. And looking at PPI, or Producer Price Index, this is at 1%. But too bad, this isn't what the Fed's exactly looking for. They're more focused on CPI, on PCE, but this is typically a leading indicator, so hopefully the others will follow. But PPI has been under 2% for quite a while now. We just need to see the other inflation indicators coming down like this is. But make no mistake, we are going to see rate cuts this year. It's just more of a matter of when, not if. And I suspect we'll start seeing rate cuts before summer, right before summer probably. But let me know what you guys got out of the Fed meeting. Let me know what you think about Cathie Wood and this roughly 20% Bitcoin allocation for portfolios being optimum. And I'm curious, are you above 20% allocated towards Bitcoin and Bitcoin related things like Bitcoin miners, Coinbase, for example? Are you roughly 20% or higher or under 20% allocation? I bet there's many of us that are much more than 20% allocated into crypto. And also let me know what miners you're loading up on. Also look for an upcoming video on CleanSpark's Bitcoin mining update. It hasn't dropped just yet, but we could get it any day now. Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.